Abraham Lincoln, Rise from Nothing Full Biography. Part 1. Before history recorded his name in textbooks, before monuments were built in his honor, before speeches were quoted and remembered, Abraham Lincoln was a boy born into circumstances that offered little comfort and even less certainty. There was no inheritance waiting for him. No established path. No assurance that effort would be rewarded. His beginnings were defined by hardship, instability, and loss. Abraham Lincoln was born in 1809 in a small log cabin in rural Kentucky. The land was rough, the conditions harsh, and life revolved around survival rather than aspiration. His family lived close to the edge of poverty, relying on manual labor and simple tools to sustain themselves. From the start, Lincoln's world was shaped by scarcity. Food was basic, shelter was fragile. Education was rare. Formal schooling was almost non-existent. Over the course of his childhood, Lincoln received less than a year of structured education in total. Schools were distant, temporary, and often inaccessible. Learning was not a priority for survival-focused families, yet Lincoln was drawn to reading. Whenever he could find a book, he read it. He read by firelight. He read while resting from physical labor. He read to understand a world that extended beyond the boundaries of his immediate environment. Books were not abundant. When he found one, he studied it deeply. He copied passages. He repeated ideas aloud. Learning, for him, was slow, deliberate, and largely self-directed. This habit, learning without guidance, would shape his entire life. His early years were marked not only by poverty, but by instability. The Lincoln family moved repeatedly, searching for land they could legally own and work. Each move meant rebuilding, starting again, and adapting to unfamiliar surroundings. At a young age, Abraham Lincoln experienced profound loss. His mother died when he was just 9 years old. Her absence left a deep imprint. Responsibility came early. Childhood, as many imagine it, did not exist in the same way for him. Work filled the days. He split wood. He carried supplies. He helped sustain the household. Physical labor was constant, exhausting, and necessary. Yet even within these demands, Lincoln found moments to reflect. He was observant, quiet, thoughtful. People noticed his ability to listen. They noticed his patience. They noticed his way with words, even when those words were simple. As Lincoln grew older, his desire for understanding did not fade. It intensified. He borrowed books whenever possible. He read law texts without formal instruction. He absorbed ideas about justice, governance, and human dignity without guidance from institutions. This independent education did not translate immediately into opportunity. In his early adulthood, Lincoln struggled to find direction. He worked various jobs, many of them physically demanding and low-paying. He attempted business ventures that failed. He accumulated debt. Stability remained elusive. Failure became familiar. He entered politics early, only to be defeated. He tried again and lost again. Each attempt required public exposure and personal risk. Each loss reinforced uncertainty, yet Lincoln did not withdraw. He refined his thinking. He sharpened his arguments. He studied law more deeply. Eventually, he became a lawyer, practicing in modest circumstances. His reputation grew slowly. He was not known for brilliance or charisma. He was known for honesty, clarity, and careful reasoning. People trusted him. This trust did not emerge from authority. It emerged from consistency. As the nation around him grew more divided, Lincoln's concerns shifted from personal survival to collective responsibility. He observed growing tensions over slavery, governance, and national identity. He listened more than he spoke. When he spoke, he chose his words carefully. His rise was not rapid. It was gradual, marked by patience and endurance rather than ambition. Election losses continued to follow him. Campaigns ended without success. Disappointment accumulated, but something else accumulated as well. Understanding. Lincoln began to see that leadership was not about popularity. It was about timing, clarity, and moral grounding. He recognized that influence required resilience, the ability to remain steady under repeated rejection. This resilience would soon be tested. As the United States moved closer to crisis, Lincoln found himself standing at a threshold he had not planned for, yet had been preparing for all along. Through years of failure, self-education, and quiet reflection, his life, up to this point, had offered no signs of destiny, only preparation. Abraham Lincoln, Rise from Nothing Full Biography. Part 2. As Abraham Lincoln moved further into adulthood, The gap between his inner development and his outward circumstances remained wide. He possessed growing clarity of thought, yet lived with continued uncertainty. Progress came slowly, often disguised as repetition rather than advancement. After several failed business attempts, Lincoln turned more seriously toward the study and practice of law. He did not attend law school. Instead, he borrowed books, read cases, and taught himself through disciplined effort. Legal language was complex, but Lincoln approached it the way he approached everything else, patiently, methodically, and without assumption of entitlement. When he was finally admitted to the bar, his practice did not begin with prestige. He traveled long distances on horseback, moving from town to town to represent ordinary clients. Courtrooms were modest. Cases were small. The work was demanding, both physically and mentally, yet this environment suited him. Lincoln listened carefully. He spoke plainly. He avoided unnecessary complication. Judges and juries responded to his sincerity. He was not known for dramatic argument, but for fairness. He presented facts clearly, respected opposing views, and grounded his reasoning in logic rather than emotion. Trust continued to follow him. At the same time, Lincoln remained drawn to politics, not as a path to status, but as a means of addressing what he increasingly viewed as moral and structural problems within the nation. The issue of slavery, in particular, weighed heavily on his thinking. Lincoln's views on slavery were shaped by gradual reflection rather than sudden conviction. He did not frame his opposition in absolute terms at first. Instead, he questioned its expansion, its impact on national unity, and its contradiction with the principles upon which the country claimed to stand. These positions were controversial. Public debate during this period was intense and divisive. Political discourse lacked restraint. Compromise was increasingly difficult. Entering this arena required courage and resilience, qualities Lincoln had developed through years of personal struggle. He ran for public office again. He lost again. Each defeat reinforced a pattern that had defined his life. Effort did not guarantee outcome. Intention did not ensure acceptance. But Lincoln's losses did not leave him unchanged. With each campaign, he refined his arguments. He learned to speak not just persuasively, but responsibly. He became more attuned to the concerns of ordinary citizens, whose lives were shaped by forces beyond their control. As the nation moved closer to conflict, Lincoln's voice gained relevance. He participated in debates that drew widespread attention. His exchanges were not theatrical. They were structured, reasoned, and grounded in principle. He resisted simplification. He acknowledged complexity. This approach distinguished him. People began to notice not just what he said, but how he said it. He did not insult opponents. He did not promise certainty. He articulated concerns without inflaming fear. In an increasingly polarized environment, this restraint stood out. Lincoln's growing visibility did not erase his doubts. He remained aware of his limitations. He questioned his readiness. He understood the weight of responsibility that leadership would require, but readiness, he had learned, is rarely complete. As tensions escalated, the country approached a moment of decision. The balance between union and division, between compromise and conflict, grew more fragile with each passing year. In this context, Lincoln's long history of failure became an asset. He was accustomed to pressure. He was familiar with disappointment. He had learned to endure criticism without retreat. When he was nominated for national office, it was not because he had dominated the political landscape. It was because he represented steadiness in a time of instability. His campaign did not promise resolution. It acknowledged difficulty. This honesty resonated. As the election approached, the nation stood divided along deep lines. The outcome would shape not only political leadership, but the future of the country itself. Lincoln's path to this moment had been anything but direct. Years of poverty. Minimal education, repeated losses. Yet these experiences had shaped a leader capable of facing uncertainty without illusion. When the election results arrived, Lincoln was chosen to lead. The victory did not mark the end of struggle. It marked the beginning of a far greater one. As he prepared to assume office, the nation began to fracture. States moved toward separation. Trust eroded. The possibility of war loomed. Lincoln, the boy from a log cabin, the self-taught lawyer, the frequent loser of elections, now faced a challenge unlike any he had encountered. The skills that had carried him this far, patience, restraint, clarity, would soon be tested at a scale that demanded more than perseverance. They would demand resolve. Abraham Lincoln, Rise from Nothing Full Biography. Part 3. When Abraham Lincoln assumed the presidency, the country he inherited was already coming apart. The divisions that had been building for decades were no longer theoretical. They were active, visible, and irreversible. Several states had declared their intention to leave the Union. Trust between regions had collapsed. Compromise, once possible, now felt unreachable. The question was no longer whether conflict would occur, but how far it would go. Lincoln entered office without illusion. He did not believe that words alone could prevent what was unfolding. He understood that leadership, in moments like this, meant making decisions that would satisfy no one completely. Every choice carried risk. Every delay carried cost. The Civil War began shortly after he took office. The scale of the conflict was unprecedented. Lives were lost by the thousands. Families were divided. The nation's future became uncertain in a way it had never been. Before Lincoln faced criticism from all sides. Some believed he acted too slowly. Others believed he acted too aggressively. Some doubted his authority. Others doubted his competence. He carried the weight of these judgments quietly. Lincoln did not approach the war as a strategist seeking victory alone. He approached it as a leader responsible for preserving the nation's core structure. His goal was not conquest. It was continuity. This distinction mattered. He resisted calls for immediate, sweeping action when he believed it would fracture the fragile coalition holding the Union together. At the same time, he resisted pressure to abandon moral principles in the name of convenience. His approach was measured. He listened to advisors. He tolerated disagreement. He adjusted plans when reality demanded it. This flexibility was not weakness. It was adaptation. The war tested Lincoln's emotional endurance. Losses accumulated. Reports of casualties arrived daily. The human cost was immense. He was known to carry these losses personally, reading letters from soldiers and families, aware that his decisions shaped their fate. During this period, Lincoln's understanding of leadership deepened. He recognized that authority did not shield one from doubt. It amplified it. The more power he held, the more carefully he weighed his choices. The issue of slavery, long present but politically constrained, became central to the war's meaning. Lincoln understood that preserving the Union without addressing slavery would leave the nation fractured in spirit, even if united in name. Yet he also knew that acting too quickly risked losing critical support. The Emancipation Proclamation emerged from this tension. It was not a sudden moral declaration. It was a strategic and ethical decision shaped by timing, necessity, and principle. By reframing the war's purpose, it altered both domestic and international perception. The decision drew intense reaction. Supporters praised it as overdue. Critics condemned it as reckless. Others questioned its limits. Lincoln accepted these reactions without defensiveness. He did not claim moral perfection. He did not claim certainty. He claimed responsibility. As the war continued, Lincoln's leadership style remained consistent. He avoided unnecessary displays of authority. He spoke plainly. He acknowledged mistakes. He replaced generals when needed, not out of pride, but out of necessity. This pragmatism extended to his communication. When he spoke publicly, his language was careful, restrained, and deliberate. He avoided triumphalism. He emphasized unity without ignoring division. His words reflected awareness of loss rather than celebration of power. In moments of national address, Lincoln's tone was reflective rather than commanding. He framed the conflict as a shared burden, not an opportunity for dominance. This approach did not end the war sooner, but it shaped how the nation understood it. As the conflict dragged on, fatigue spread, support waned, doubt resurfaced. Lincoln faced re-election under conditions that would have overwhelmed many leaders. Once again, his position was uncertain. Once again, his future depended on public judgment. Despite the ongoing war, Lincoln remained composed. He did not campaign aggressively. He did not appeal to fear. He allowed his record, imperfect as it was, to speak. When he was re-elected, it was not a mandate for triumph. It was a reluctant affirmation of continuity. The war eventually moved toward conclusion, but not resolution. Victory came at a devastating cost. As the nation prepared to transition from conflict to reconstruction, Lincoln's focus shifted. He spoke not of punishment, but of healing, not of vengeance, but of reconciliation. His vision for the future was cautious. He believed that rebuilding required patience, that lasting unity could not be imposed. that the wounds of war would take generations to heal. This perspective reflected his lifelong pattern. He had never rushed transformation. He had never trusted sudden solutions. He believed in gradual progress guided by restraint. At the moment when his leadership seemed most validated, when survival had turned toward possibility, his journey reached an abrupt and irreversible end. Abraham Lincoln, Rise from Nothing. Full biography, Part 4. As the Civil War drew toward its end, the nation stood exhausted. The scale of loss was difficult to comprehend. Cities were damaged, economies disrupted, and families permanently altered. Victory, when it came, carried little sense of relief. It arrived weighed down by grief. Abraham Lincoln understood this mood. He did not view the end of war as an achievement to be celebrated. He viewed it as a responsibility to be carried carefully. The decisions that followed would determine whether the country merely survived or truly endured. Lincoln's attention turned toward Reconstruction. He believed that reunification required restraint rather than retaliation. His language reflected this belief. He spoke about healing rather than punishment, about rebuilding rather than settling scores. He recognized that lasting peace could not be imposed through force alone. This approach was not universally supported. Many demanded harsher measures. Many wanted accountability delivered quickly. Many believed that firmness required severity. Lincoln disagreed. His experience had taught him that pressure without patience creates resistance, not resolution. He understood that reconciliation demanded time, empathy, and humility, qualities often dismissed as weakness during moments of power. In his final public addresses, Lincoln emphasized shared responsibility. He avoided assigning collective blame. He acknowledged suffering on all sides, without diminishing the moral realities that had shaped the conflict. His words reflected a lifetime of reflection. He had lived with hardship. He had endured failure. He had observed division closely. This background informed his understanding of human behavior. He knew that humiliation hardens opposition, while dignity leaves room for change. As plans for Reconstruction took shape, Lincoln intended to guide the process personally. He believed continuity of leadership mattered during fragile transitions. He saw Reconstruction not as a separate phase, but as an extension of the work of preservation. But history rarely unfolds according to intention. Only days after the war's conclusion, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. The act was sudden, violent, and irreversible. A leader who had carried the nation through its most severe crisis was removed at the moment when guidance was most needed. The shock was immediate. Grief spread quickly. Uncertainty returned. The future became unclear once again. Lincoln did not live to oversee the Reconstruction he envisioned. The responsibility passed to others, shaped by different priorities, pressures, and interpretations of justice. His absence altered the course of history. The nation moved forward, but not along the path Lincoln had hoped to guide. Reconstruction became contested, uneven, and incomplete. The divisions he sought to heal persisted, transformed rather than resolved. Over time, Lincoln's legacy grew. His speeches were studied. His decisions were analyzed. His character was re-examined. Yet it is important to remember that during his life, Lincoln was not universally admired. He was criticized intensely. His choices were questioned. His leadership was doubted. Greatness, in his case, was not recognized immediately. It emerged gradually as distance allowed reflection. What became clear was not perfection, but consistency. Lincoln did not claim certainty. He did not promise ease. He navigated complexity with restraint, but where that power does not eliminate doubt, it amplifies it. His assassination froze him in public memory, but his life tells a broader story, a story of preparation through hardship, of leadership shaped by limitation, of authority exercised with humility. Lincoln's rise did not result from ambition alone. It emerged from endurance, from the ability to remain engaged through long periods of obscurity, rejection, and uncertainty. He did not escape difficulty. He learned to operate within it. As the nation mourned, it also began to recognize what had been lost, not just a president, but a particular style of leadership, one grounded in patience rather than force, in understanding rather than certainty. This recognition grew over time. And with it, a deeper appreciation of the path that had led a man from a log cabin to the center of national history. Abraham Lincoln, Rise from Nothing. Full biography, Part 5. Abraham Lincoln's life did not end with resolution. It ended with interruption. And yet, Interruption does not erase meaning. In some ways, it clarifies it. To understand Lincoln's rise from nothing, it is necessary to look not only at what he achieved, but at how he moved through uncertainty. His life was never defined by smooth progress. It was defined by persistence without promise. From the beginning, Lincoln lived at the edge of instability, born into poverty with little access to education. He developed discipline without instruction and curiosity without encouragement. His early years offered no protection from hardship. They offered no assurances that effort would lead to improvement. Yet, effort continued. He read when books were scarce. He studied when guidance was absent. He worked when opportunity was limited. This pattern of self-directed engagement became the foundation of his character. Lincoln's failures were not isolated events. They formed a sequence. Business ventures collapsed. Political campaigns ended in defeat. Public ambitions were delayed repeatedly. At each stage, there was justification for withdrawal. He did not withdraw. Instead, he adjusted. He refined his thinking. He strengthened his reasoning. He learned how to endure disappointment without bitterness. This capacity to absorb loss without losing direction distinguished him. Over time, it shaped a leader capable of navigating contradiction, someone able to hold competing truths without simplifying them. When Lincoln rose to national leadership, he carried this discipline with him. He did not promise clarity in a moment defined by confusion. He did not offer certainty in a time governed by doubt. He offered steadiness. In the face of war, he resisted extremes. He neither rushed toward vengeance nor retreated into indecision. His leadership was marked by deliberation, a willingness to wait when waiting served a purpose, and to act when delay would deepen harm. This balance was not accidental. It was learned. Years of living without control had taught him the limits of authority. He understood that leadership does not eliminate complexity. It requires coexistence with it. Lincoln's decisions during the Civil War reflected this understanding. He accepted criticism without defensiveness. He replaced strategies without clinging to pride. He acknowledged mistakes without surrendering responsibility. These choices did not make him universally admired. They made him effective. His approach to the end of the war revealed the depth of his perspective. At a moment when triumph could have justified severity, he chose restraint. He believed that rebuilding required dignity, not as a moral abstraction, but as a practical necessity. This belief emerged not from ideology, but from lived experience. He had known humiliation. He had known exclusion. He had known what it meant to be dismissed. He understood that lasting unity cannot be imposed. It must be allowed to form. Lincoln's death removed him from the process he hoped to guide, but it did not remove the imprint of his approach. Over time, his legacy came to represent a different model of success, one not defined by dominance, but by endurance. His rise from nothing did not lead to ease. It led to responsibility. And responsibility in his life was never glamorous. It was heavy, sustained, and often isolating. What makes Lincoln's story enduring is not that he reached the highest office, but that he arrived there without abandoning the habits formed in obscurity. He remained thoughtful. He remained measured. He remained aware of his limitations. These qualities, developed long before recognition, shaped his capacity to lead when recognition arrived. Lincoln's life suggests that influence does not require early advantage. It requires engagement, repeated, patient, and often unnoticed. It requires the willingness to continue when outcomes are uncertain. His story does not promise success. It does not offer shortcuts. It does not suggest that persistence guarantees reward. What it offers is perspective, that beginnings do not determine endings, that failure can refine rather than define, that leadership grows from character shaped over time. Abraham Lincoln did not rise because history selected him. He rose because he remained present through difficulty, attentive to complexity, and open to adjustment. From a log cabin to the presidency, from obscurity to responsibility, his path was neither inevitable nor smooth. It was deliberate, and in that deliberation lies the deeper meaning of his rise from nothing. **** For more about famous people, subscribe our channel, Rise from Nothing.